hi. So I'm gonna go ahead and do something a little out of the norm today and review Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. That's right, Spider-Man the Musical. See, while I was in New York last week with the men's chorus during spring tour, I and a group of few other people went to see Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, and I would like to talk about that today. Now, to be perfectly honest, going into it, I wasn't expecting much. All I knew about this musical was that it was based on Spider-Man and that there was a lot of infamy surrounding it due to the various accidents that have happened. So I wasn't really expecting anything good to come out of this. However, I was pleasantly surprised, and I actually enjoyed watching the musical. Now, let me explain why. First of all, hey! What? What are you doing? Reviewing Spider-Man the Musical. You're reviewing a musical? Yes. That's my thing. True. But this musical is based on a comic book, which you haven't read. Be that as it may, there is no denying the comic book feeling of this musical. All the sets look like they've been taken from the page of a comic book, from the set of Peter's room to the set of the final epic battle between the Green Goblin and Spider-Man. So, you're gonna do the review anyway, huh? Yes. Okay. Well, that was easy. The biggest forte that this musical has is the sets and the costumes. From a visual standpoint, this musical is amazing. There is the comic book feel, but even beyond that, just the detail of the sets are just so wonderful. In that final epic battle between the Green Goblin and Spider-Man, there's a very cool perspective kind of thing with the set. They actually made it look like you were looking from above, from the top of a building, down to the street below, because that's where the battle was taking place. They even added to the realism by having little lights along the road to make it look like there were cars driving along it. The attention to detail of this musical is just spectacular. And the costumes look pretty good too, aside from possibly the lizards, but other than that, a lot of the costumes are very good. I mean, okay, a lot of the characters are just people, but all of the subhuman people, including Spider-Man, have very cool costumes. They also have this really cool thing where they actually have 9 different Spider-Mans aside from the actual Peter Parker. Again, it echoes this comic book feeling that you see Spider-Man everywhere, even though technically he's not everywhere, but they're able to emulate that on stage by having the various Spider-Mans. Spider-Men. Which do you think would be correct in this instance? Because I'm not really sure. But while the sets may be visually stunning, there's no point in denying the fact that there are definitely negative aspects to this musical. Certainly not perfect, and I think a good example of this is, I have returned. Oh my gosh, really?
Oh yes.
Why?
To show off my new socks.
So you interrupted my video to show off your socks?
Yes.
You can go now.
Indeed I can.
Would you get out of here?
No need to get testy.
So as I was saying, there are a few aspects of this musical that are less than good and can distract from the good things. One of the examples is actually the main plot. There are a few things in this plot that kind of come in and then either go nowhere or end so quickly that you kind of begin to wonder why they put it in the first place. A good example of this is the Sinister Six. The Sinister Six is kind of the sub-villains of this musical. Obviously, the main villain is the Green Goblin, but the Sinister Six are 6 scientists that the Green Goblin experiments on, and so turn them into these 6 individual villains that he titles the Sinister Six. And this is actually a pretty cool premise, and all of the costumes just look great, except, as I mentioned, for the lizard, but other than that, they are very impressive, and they are very interesting villains that just went nowhere. The Sinister Six were fairly easily defeated by Spider-Man, which is interesting because they were built up as so undefeatable when the Green Goblin created them. And most of them pretty much got destroyed by Spider-Man spraying web over them, and then they just sank into the ground. I'm not really sure what happened, actually. And part of me wishes that they just hadn't put the Sinister Six in. If they're going to include the Sinister Six, I feel like they should have done more with them because they are pretty cool characters. They do look pretty cool. And I think they could have done more with them than they actually did. Aside from the plot, there's also the music. The music is not necessarily what you'd expect from a musical. For one thing, it was written by Bono. And aside from that, there are just a few numbers that aren't necessarily good. I think I enjoyed listening to the music, but it's not a soundtrack that I'm going to rush out and buy and want to have in my collection. Though I will say that the music does fit the atmosphere that the musical is going for. But despite the weak plot and the less than good musical numbers, I still consider this a fairly good musical. There are quite a few characters in this musical that I like. For example, I think definitely my favorite... Hey, what now?
Got a bone to pick with you.
Okay, and you are?
Felix Churchgoer.
Have you already forgotten? Oh right, you were going to interview me for my first video, but then I decided that it wasn't really a punishment anymore, so I...
You stopped. You interrupted me. Just like everyone else. You, idiot Brimstone.
Is that your problem?
Well, duh. You even said that you would do it, and you never did.
Well, yeah, but I figured that I was already into doing these videos and all that kind of stuff, plus there was the whole trying to stop Dr. Cement from taking over the world back in October, and I figured it would be kind of late to do an About Me video this late.
Yeah, I see how it is. Everybody abandons Felix.
I don't think it's like that, Felix.
Yeah, whatever.
You haven't heard the last of me. Well, that was strange. I think by far my favorite character is the kind of dual character of Norman Osborn and the Green Goblin. In the first act, the Green Goblin doesn't exist, except in the character of Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn is essentially a mad scientist, but he's a mad scientist who's trying to make the world a better place. By the end of Act 1, when an experiment goes wrong and he inadvertently kills his wife, he goes kind of, well, even more insane. And so he turns into the Green Goblin, who is definitely one of the most over-the-top villains I have ever seen. And it is glorious. I'll go ahead and be honest, I couldn't really take him seriously as an actual threat, necessarily, but he was definitely a lot of fun to watch. In many ways, that's basically how I feel about the entire musical. It's very enjoyable to watch, but it's not necessarily something that you should take seriously. I don't know if the people who made this musical was trying to make a serious musical, but if that's what they were going for, then they failed. Pretty simple. And while I will say this definitely isn't one of my favorite musicals, it was still a fun musical. It was still an enjoyable musical, and I think, given the chance, I would see it again. Paying as much as I did before, which was $39. So if you're looking for a fun, silly musical that you don't want to take seriously, I would definitely advise checking out Spiderman Turn Off the Dark. But again, that's just my opinion. If you've seen it and you have your own, I would kind of like to know what you thought of it, so let me know down in the comments. And that's all from me, so I will... Really? Somebody else is interrupting my video? And they're going to make me open the door? Of course they are.